Hi everyone, this is Ben, and for my presentation today I wanted to talk about the visual effects industry. I want to touch on why this is such a growing industry in our media today, and I also like to go over some of the jobs involved in making visual effects, as well as kind of the current situation on that whole marketplace. I also want to talk a little bit about the technological advances that have helped push visual effects forward, which will lead me into where I think this industry is going in the future. So, you have obviously noticed visual effects in your movies within the past decade or so. I mean, all the top 10 grossing movies each year since I think around 2010 or 2011 have all been either fully animated movies or high spectacle blockbuster films that have heavily utilized visual effects. So this in and of itself obviously creates a high demand for visual effects in our movies, but it's not only that, streaming has essentially flooded our world with all this sort of different content. A lot of it is animated, and a lot of it requires visual effects to effectively tell the story that they want to tell. So all in all, you are just seeing a general demand for visual effects in our media, and that just goes beyond movies. It goes into our television. In fact, TV shows like Game of Thrones are breaking records with the visual effects that they use. We're seeing it a lot in our commercials. You might not notice it as much, but a lot of the commercials, especially tech commercials that you see on social media or on TV, are all entirely digital, and utilize a lot of the same software that goes into visual effects and movie making. And another industry that I'm going to largely ignore but I think is notable to bring up is the video game industry, which also utilizes a lot of the same techniques and software as visual effects. Especially with things like cutscenes, which are essentially just short animated movies. Obviously, there are some differences there, but there's a lot of crossover, and I think it was worth mentioning. So yeah, I think first I'm going to go over some of the jobs involved in making visual effects. Some of the key roles are 3D modeling, which is essentially just creating the assets or characters or environments that are used in visual effects shots. You also have shading, texturing, and lighting, which really sells a lot of the photorealistic detail in the environments and the CG animated characters that you see on screen. You also have animation, obviously, for, you got fully digital characters running around on screen. You got explosions. These are all animated. You have FX, which are essentially dynamic simulations, which boil down to things like fire, smoke, cloth, water, like fur and hair, rubble, just to name a few uses for FX. You have match moving, which is essentially just matching the visual effects, the fully digital components, into the live action filmed camera work. And then you have digital compositing, which is essentially just putting that all together and selling it all as one cohesive real life experience. So as you can see, there are lots of different roles to fill in the making of visual effects. And what that usually means is that for movies like Avengers Infinity War, which utilized a total of 2,680 visual effects shots, they had to split that work up between 3 different visual effects studios, or VFX houses, which included big names like Weta Digital, Framestore, and Industrial Light and Magic, just to name a few. One of the interesting aspects of the job market in visual effects is that a lot of the tedious work is being outsourced to Asian countries like China and India, where paid labor is a lot cheaper. And so this usually involves a lot of tedious, time-consuming jobs like rotoscoping and wire removal, which would otherwise just be a lot more expensive if you assigned that to the big visual effects houses, which are usually in charge of taking care of the more larger scale things. So as you can see, there are lots of different jobs and roles that need to be filled in order to pull off these spectacular visual effects that you see on screen. Some of the most notable movies that I'm going to mention here are Avatar, which was revolutionary in the world of visual effects for being able to replicate the actor's performance on these digital models of the aliens in real time. James Cameron was able to pull this off actually by using a video game engine, which was able to display the motion capture animation in real time. But taking it a few years forward to last year, Infinity War was also pretty revolutionary in its construction of the villain Thanos. Josh Brolin obviously did an amazing job with his performance, but what really helped sell his performance on the digital model of Thanos was that the visual effects houses that worked on him used a lot of artificial intelligent assistance to accurately capture Josh Brolin's facial performance, and it really helped project that performance onto Thanos' face. Plus, on top of all of this, our general dynamic simulation technology is really taking off, and it's just getting better and better by the year. A lot of that work can be seen in movies with things like explosions and hair, but on the more smaller scale with just general tests, if you were to look them up online, there are lots of people who utilize this technology all by themselves to create extremely accurate simulations for things as random as like exploding fruit or tearing cloth. Lots of gore and blood is used in simulation processes as well. So there's a lot of that. Essentially, we're just over time getting better results with less time and fewer resources involved. We're actually to the point now where we're getting the live action remake of Lion King, which is in reality a fully digitally animated movie. But we're at the point now where we can call that live action. Plus, not to mention just so many of the films that we've seen over the past couple of years have entire scenes or sequences that are entirely digitally animated, but they're incorporated in a live action film, which helps sell its photorealism. Now, here are some of my predictions for where I think visual effects is headed in the future. For one, we are not very good yet at replicating humans close up on screen. A lot of the digitally created characters are either not human, or if they are, they're kind of sent into the background, or they're used as puppets for high motion, like high action scenes where they just like zip across the screen. You don't have time to really analyze the full detail. Rogue One is the most recent movie that comes to mind where they tried really selling a digital human character on screen with the digital creation of characters like Princess Leia and Grand Moff Tarkin. But if you've read any opinions on that online, a lot of people think it looks kind of creepy, and it does. It ventures into the uncanny valley. One interesting TV show on Netflix that I actually want to bring up is Love, Death, Robots, which is a pretty good showcase as to where we are with fully replicating humans. Some of the episodes in that show really try to pull off the photorealistic look, and I think just over time that's going to get better. So I think what we're going to see in the future is this new market for fully digital, quote, live action films, like The Lion King I mentioned earlier, where it's fully digital but, sold as this live action photorealistic story. Some of the reasons I think that this is going to happen is, one, the fully digital media has its own artistic expression. I go back to Love, Death, Robots, which I mentioned earlier. As a fully animated show, the themes it portrays and the way it portrays them are inherently different from how that would normally be portrayed with live action. But aside from that, actors, if you look at the budget for films, usually take up a large percentage of that, almost to an arguably unfair degree. Some of these actors are extremely well paid and cost a lot of money, and that's because they bring in fans and they bring in audience members who love those actors. But as we start to phase out the need for performers with tools like AI, which was used in Infinity War, I think what we're going to start seeing is actually a lot of films with completely new constructed faces that aren't recognizable. Obviously, live action is going to stay around for a long time, but like I said, I think there's just going to be a new market for these fully digital movies. And also, on top of that, I think as the technology becomes more accessible and cheaper to use, a lot of high scale visual effects are going to start appearing in indie projects. One of the names that comes to mind for me is the YouTuber Freddie Wong, who made a lot of popular videos over 5 years back. But even back then, for like a YouTuber, he utilized a lot of pretty impressive visual effects that he and like his small team of creators just made on their own. And I think as this technology gets better and more accessible, we're going to start seeing a lot more work like that. So clearly, visual effects is already an incredibly important staple in our filmmaking process, as well as television and commercials. And I think just as our technology and skills get better at this kind of stuff, it's really going to start taking center stage. So I hope this was informative. Have a great day.